meeting is being recorded.
As you've just heard, this is all being recorded, so we can send you a link later. Thank you very much for attending this British Council IELTS webinar on Academic Writing Task 1. My name is Sarah, and I'm an IELTS teacher and teacher trainer based at the British Council in Paris. Helping me to answer your questions today is the wonderful team of Yasir in India, Layla in England, Daniela in Scotland, Aidan in Wales, and Louisa here with me in Paris. Before we start the webinar, I'd just like to say a few words about the situation we all find ourselves in at the moment. With COVID-19, obviously there are lots of difficulties at the moment, and at the British Council, we are monitoring the situation very closely and daily through all our colleagues and offices around the world. We do understand and empathise with the pressure and uncertainty people are going through, and this webinar series is a part of our efforts to help you, the test takers, during this period. The situation is fluid and changing rapidly. There are many aspects such as lockdowns, restrictions on movement and gatherings, social distancing, etc., that are put in place by authorities and governments and therefore must be followed strictly. We update our website and social media platforms with changes as soon as they are made. And you can always get the latest information from takeielts.org and ielts.org. Okay, just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. So the webinar is going to last a total of 60 minutes. It'll be about 45 minutes of presentation and about 15 minutes for your questions at the end. This is very important. Please could you use the question and answer box for your questions for me to answer at the end or for my team to answer during the webinar. But when I ask you directly questions, could you put your answers into the chat box? Okay, so chat box is for you to respond to me, and question and answer box is for other things you want to ask the team or me at the end. There's lots of people here, so it's not going to be possible to answer everybody's question. So please, if you see a question that's similar to yours, like it, and then we'll go for questions which seem to be the most common. As we said, the webinar will be recorded and we will send you the link within 3 days. Okay, I'm afraid in this webinar we won't be able to answer any questions about your individual test booking. So please contact your test centre for information on this. Each country and each test centre is going to differ depending on the country, the conditions in that country. If you have any, you might have heard about the IELTS indicator test. If you have any questions about this, again, it depends on where you are and what you want. So please, we can't answer questions on those. Please go to the IELTSindicator.com website and they will be able to answer your questions there. And lastly, please do not share phone numbers or personal information, and please do be courteous at all times. Otherwise, we might have to exclude you from the webinar, but I'm sure no one's going to not do that. Okay, so before we look at the programme, let's just find out a little bit more about you. So can we have the first poll questions, please? Okay, so just to find out a little bit. So have you taken the IELTS test before, yes or no? And what score do you need in the test? Okay, so could you please just give you a minute, could you tick the appropriate boxes for, or circles for you? Okay, super. Perhaps we could see the results. Excellent. So, oh, 3/4 of you haven't taken the test before. Okay, some of you have. And the majority of you are looking for quite high scores, between 6 and 9, which is very high, but most of you, 53%, 7 and 8. Okay, well, that's interesting. Okay, I hope this webinar will help you all. Let's have a look at what we're going to try and do in the next sort of 45 minutes. We're going to look at what task 1 is, so we know exactly what we're dealing with, how the data is shown, how to really dig into the question to make sure we understand exactly what we have to do, how to write the introduction and the overview, which is an incredibly important part of this task. We're going to spend a little bit of time on that. Identifying, selecting and organizing the main data that you need, and then writing the description in the body paragraph. So that's what we're going to try and cover. So let's get cracking. So first of all, what is task 1? So in the chat box, please, can you just put down what you know, what it is, how many words you have to write, and how much time? So for academic task 1, yep, yes, okay, yep, 20 minutes, 150 words, the description of data. Yes, okay. You're saying the correct answer so quickly, I can barely catch your names, but I think you've all got the right idea. So yes, many of you said it's a description of data or a report on data. You can use either of those words. 150 words minimum, okay? It's minimum, there's no maximum, but 150 words is the least. Okay, and you have, as many of you have said, the 20 minutes to write that report or that description. Okay, so how is it marked? What's the examiner looking for? Now there are 4 categories that you're marked in. Do you know the names of those criteria? Yeah, grammar, yes. Yeah. Okay, Nazila, yes. EBITDA, task response, sort of, yes. Achievement. Again, you've obviously all been doing your homework on the test before joining this webinar. So let me just say you're absolutely right. So task achievement, did you actually answer the question as it was set? Coherence and cohesion, did you organize the information in logical order? And did you link your ideas well? Lexical resource, vocabulary. But did you use a good range of vocabulary, appropriate vocabulary, and without too many spelling mistakes? Grammatical range and accuracy. Did you use the correct tenses? Did you use the right comparative forms, etc.? Okay, good. Right, let's have a look at how the data is presented in task 1. Here you have 6 diagrams, A to F, and I'd like you to match a name of those diagrams with those words there. So table, map plan, line graph, pie chart, process diagram, and bar chart. So everybody together, what is A? Into the chat box, please. Okay, yes, good. B, what is B? Okay, B, yeah, okay. Very good, all right. C, what's C? And D, what is D? Yes, some of you are getting it right. And E, yep. And the last one, F. What's F? Yeah, okay, let's have a look and see whether you were right. So A is a pie chart. B is the line graph. C, the bar graph. D, a process diagram. E is a map or plan, and as you said, F is a table. So just make it clear, in this webinar, we'll be dealing with the chart, so line graph, bar graph mainly, and next Thursday, we'll be doing a webinar looking at maps and plans and process diagrams. So if you have any questions about maps and plans and process diagrams, please come back to us next Thursday and join the webinar and ask your questions then. Okay, so let's look at how we go about writing this. So normally a task 1 answer will have 3 parts, certainly 2, but can have 3. It must have an introduction, and then a body paragraph, or possibly 2 body paragraphs, and if there's time, a conclusion. So the next poll question, please. Can we have the next poll question? Yes, thank you. Okay, so the introduction is very important in task 1, because if you get that right, it makes everything else much easier. So looking at the introduction, which 2 of the following must go into the introduction? So the data, for example, percentages or amounts, a description of what the diagram is, your opinions and thoughts about the information in the diagram, a description of the main trend or change, explanation of the information. So can you choose 2 of those 5 things, please, that must go into the introduction? I'll give you a minute to have a think about that. Okay, and can we have the results, please? Okay, what have we got? 82%, yes, very good. A description of what the diagram is, absolutely essential. And 46% said a description of the main trend or change. Excellent. The opinion and thoughts or explanation, we do not write our opinions, thoughts or explanations in task 1. It is a description. So let's have a look then at what goes into the introduction. Okay, so as you correctly, and so many of you correctly said, you have to say what the diagram is. And then you have to say what the main trend or event or changes are. And this is the overview, which, as I say, is terribly important. In the body paragraph, that's where you put your data. So those of you who clicked on data in the poll question, you really keep the data for the body paragraphs. And the conclusion, if there's time, you just rephrase, restate your introduction, the overview again. Okay, so let's look at some steps that you can go through to answer this question. So, excuse me. Sorry. Step 1 is very important, understanding the question. So this is a fairly typical question. So the chart below shows the value of internet downloads in the UK from 1999 to 2008. Okay, and then you get the instructions, which is summarize information by selecting, reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So I've put in bold the important words, you know, summarize, select the main features, and all importantly, make comparisons. Okay, so to really understand the question, you need to sort of look at the actual graph or chart or whatever and sort of ask it questions. So you have a clear understanding of what information is available from the diagram. And that's what I'm going to ask you to do. So let's start with the questions on the right. So again, in the chat box, please. What form is the data on the vertical axis in? What form is the data on the vertical axis in? Yeah, yes, but on the vertical, that's the one on the left-hand side going up. Okay, okay. If you look at it carefully, it's got the pounds sign, so pound sterling, pounds, and it's billions, billions. Okay, and the next question, what form is the data in on the horizontal axis? That's going along the bottom. Yeah, that's nice. Time, years, exactly. And how many years are represented? How many years do we have information about? Count the number of years. Yes, it looks like 9, but in actual fact, we've got 10 years worth of data. So sometimes the way the dates are written can be misleading. So it's worth actually looking along the line and counting how many years are represented. And next question, how many different products are represented on this bar chart? Yeah, 4. Good. And I won't get you to type in what they are because we can see that they're games, it's music, it's DVD sales, and it's DVD rentals. Okay, excellent. So what do we do? Now we've asked the diagram lots of questions, we understand what it's showing us. What do we do next? Let's have a look. Okay, so the next important step is writing the first sentence of the introduction. Okay, so this is what the actual question is described as on the test paper. The chart below shows the value of internet downloads in the UK from 1999 to 2008. Okay, so we want to say exactly the same thing, but we want to say it in our own words. So just type your ideas into the chat box, please. Remember, it's the chat box, not the question and answer box. Can you put your ideas as to what you could say instead of chart? What words can you think of that you could put? Okay, bar graph. Mona says bar chart. Jaideep says bar chart. Yep, Maria. Okay, very good. Yeah, yes, of course you can. And what about another way of saying value? Can you think of another way of saying value? Amount. Another way. Worth. Yes, exactly. Okay, I said worth. Sorry, Bati is saying, well, yeah, very good indeed. Okay, and what about from 1999 to 2008? Is there another way? It's not terribly important to change the dates because they are what they are, but could we say it's something? Yeah, people are saying like 10 years, and some people are saying between. So instead of from, we can say between. Excellent, okay. So all of those ideas are very good. Let's have a look at my version of it. So as some of you suggested, instead of just saying chart, we show the examiner that our vocabulary is greater than that, and we know what it is, we know it's a bar chart. And instead of value, we can say how much something was worth. And instead of 1999 to 2008, over a period of 10 years. But do you notice also, excuse me, so the red is the rewording, and in blue are the extra bits of information that we've taken from looking at inside the diagram. So I'm just saying downloads, we've said downloads of music, films and games. And in just saying just value, we're saying what the value is. It's in billions of pounds. Okay, so that's a way of making a very solid start to your answer. Okay, so the next step is understanding what the main features, what goes into our overview. Okay, so we have to ask ourselves what stands out, what is highest, longest, biggest, smallest, what changes the most, perhaps what doesn't change, but really asking ourselves what has the diagram told us that we didn't know before. So just have a look at the bar chart again. Okay, so no data here. Absolutely no data, just pretty colours. So can you tell me, first of all, what's happening to the mauve bars. What's happening to the mauve bars overall? Can you see? Yep, it's declining, going up and down a bit, getting less. Okay, good. What about the purple? This purple one, the first one. What's happening to that? The purple one. Yeah, increasing by time. Very good. Okay, so for me, let's have a look at it again. Sometimes I find it a bit difficult to see a pattern in a bar chart. And if you actually change the bar chart into a line graph by drawing lines over it, you can see, I think you can see the pattern more clearly. So for here, for me, the thing that stands out is the increase, the very, very big increase of the downloading of downloaded games. So we need to take that bit of information and turn that into our overview. Okay, so we've got our first sentence, which we looked at before, and now step 4 is writing the second sentence, the overview. So when compared to other downloads, it is clear that the main development over this period is the huge increase in the value of downloaded games. Okay, and that gives us the overview, which is really important because you cannot get above a 6 or 6.5 for task achievement if you don't have a clear overview. All right, so really, if you're practicing at home, really practice on writing the overviews. And you'll also see that that's quite long, and it is in fact about 45 words, I think. So the introduction is quite a solid piece of work. Okay, so let's move on to step 5, which is selecting the data. But before we do, again, very quickly in the chat box, please, can you say what you think is the most important thing that this line graph shows us? What is it? What's it telling us about the world that we didn't know before? Yeah, there are 2 trends. Is there any relationship between them that you can see? Remember, you have to make comparisons very often. Okay, yeah. Yes, Jennifer saying total crimes comes down when there's more policemen. Exactly, that's precisely what is happening. That there is, between 1999 and 2000, a huge increase in the number of policemen and women, and over the same period, a dramatic fall in the number of crimes. So yes, exactly. But going on to step 5, selecting the data, just have a look at this. If you were writing a description of this, remember, you've only got 20 minutes, you've just spent sort of perhaps 10 minutes looking at the diagram and writing your introduction. I'd like you to think about which bits of data you would write about if you had to do a body paragraph about this. So just in the chat box, can you put the years that you would talk about in your body paragraph? Put your ideas of which years in the chat box. Okay. Yeah, people are saying, some people are saying, but there's more than one point that you can talk about, remember. You can't, somebody's put 1999 to 2009. You can't do everything because remember, important part of the instructions is that you select the data. You don't actually try and report all the data. Okay, so let's have a look at what I would recommend. So we start at the beginning. Because we need a baseline, and with line graphs we normally start chronologically. So we start off with 1999 and then we'd probably look at mention nouns that describe changes.
This
You'll need
meeting
to
is
make
being
sure
recorded.
that you're using the right tenses. For example, is the graph or chart about the past? Is it about now? Is it perhaps a projection for what might happen in the future? So think about all of those things as well. And then think about the linking devices that you will need to use. Okay, so things like whereas, at the same time, that sort of thing, so that you know exactly what you are linking, what you are connecting. So if we just go back to, let's just go back to this one. So for example, you could say that in 1999, there were 330,000 police officers in Scotland. At the same time, there were about 440,000 crimes. So you can use this language to link your ideas and to show how they are connected and to make the comparison. Okay. Okay, and then think about the length of your body paragraph. I say about 100 to 120 words. That's because you've written about 40 words or 50 words or something like that in your introduction. So if you write 100 to 120 words in your body paragraph, that will also be useful. Okay, and then next, step 8. Andrea, you're absolutely right. I got my numbers muddled up. Andrea's pointed out that I didn't call out the right numbers. So let's just go back. Thanks, Andrea. I do this every time I do this graph. So we've got total numbers of crimes was 430 or 440, and the number of police officers was in fact about 14,500. So thanks, Andrea, and I hope everybody else understands as well. Okay. Okay, so before we go on to the last 2 steps, I'd just like to look at some of the vocabulary that's needed. Now, this is an answer, a model answer for the bar chart that we've been looking at. And so it hasn't got the introduction because that's separate. I'm just going to read it out to you. So if you could follow at the same time. So in 1999, the value of downloaded games was just over £1 billion, almost half the value of music at just under £2 billion. The value of the games increased steadily until 2002, when it reached just under £2 billion, nearly £2 billion, sorry. Over the same period, the downloading of music had, sorry, I can't actually see it very clearly, had grown slightly and was then worth just over 2 billion. Between 2002 and 2002 and 2005, the value of downloaded games remains fairly stable, whereas music decreased slightly. Then between 2006 and 2008, there was a huge rise in the worth of the games, reaching a peak of 2008 of about £4 million, £4 billion. The reverse was true of the worth of music downloads. By 2008, they were valued at less than 1.5 billion. So there's a mistake there. But so having a look at that, can you just have a look at the next poll question, please? Okay, so look at that body paragraph and just decide what the words in green are. Are they adjectives or adverbs? Or are they nouns and verbs showing change or approximations? The words in blue, again, are they adverbs or adjectives, nouns and verbs or approximations? And the words in red, the same. Choose one. You can scroll down to get to the bottom of question 3. Just give you a minute to think about that. Thank you. Okay, let's have the results, please. Okay, so the words and phrases in green are, yes, they're approximations, and we'll talk about why that's important in a minute. The words and phrases in blue are, yes, adverbs or adjectives, 75% if you got that right. And the words in red are the nouns and the verbs that show change. That's well done. Well done, everybody. Okay, so let's just look at why this is important and what sort of vocabulary we have here. Now, I've worked with a colour bar chart to make it easier for you to see, but in actual fact, in the IELTS test itself, it'll be black and white and shades of grey, and it won't be very big, so it's not big, it's not bright, not in colour. So sometimes it can be quite difficult to read the exact figures, the exact data. Okay, so rather than say sort of boldly that it's £2 billion, because it looks roughly like it is, use some of these approximations: just over, just under, almost, nearly, about, less than. Use these sort of words to make sure that you're not misrepresenting or misstating the data. And again, looking at the nouns and verbs that you can use, don't worry about these super dramatic verbs and nouns like plummet and soar and those sort of things. Those are the sort of words that you might see in a newspaper about the price of oil or something like that. You can just use common but good words like increase, decrease, rise, fall, drop, etc. And we can make these more precise. We can show our range of lexis, how good our vocabulary is, by using adverbs and adjectives to qualify the verbs and nouns to show that we really understand the diagram and how good our vocabulary actually is. So something increased steadily, decreased slightly, remained fairly stable, that sort of thing. So you need to try and build in these adverbs and adjectives. Okay, let's go on then to the next slide. Okay, so writing the conclusion. So as I said, you don't actually have to write a conclusion, but if you've got the time, it's a nice thing to do to sort of round the whole thing off, to finish off your essay. But remember that it should only be one or two sentences. You can often do it in one. Perhaps just start with, to sum up, and then you basically restate what your overview was. So this diagram shows us that, whatever. Okay, trying to use again a paraphrase, different words, the ones you used in your overview. Now it's very important that you don't add any new information. So if you suddenly think that you've missed out an important piece of data, there is no point trying to write it into the conclusion. It's the wrong place for it. So if you can squeeze it in, perhaps into the body, then fine, but do not write new information in the conclusion. Also, please don't try and interpret the data. Don't try and explain it, or perhaps say that you disagree with it, or perhaps the data would not be true in your country, or anything like that at all. Do not sort of in any way try and explain or react to the data. It is purely a description of what you can see. Okay, and the last step, which is checking. Okay, so I know this is very difficult to do when you're actually in the test, but it's something that you can certainly do while you're practicing at home. Okay, so when you're practicing at home, when you're writing these task 1, check your work for these sorts of mistakes. Check it for the correct data. Have you put it in billions or millions? Have you said percentage when it's numbers, or have you said number when it's percentage? So check that you've actually got the data in the right form. That's very important. Check that for your grammar mistakes. Now, I know this is very difficult. We all find it difficult to find our own mistakes. But you might know, because you've had classes before in general English or in IELTS classes, and your teachers have marked particular things in your essays before. Perhaps you know that you sometimes forget to put a third person S on. So start making yourself aware of the mistakes that you've made in the past, and see if you can quickly check through your writing for those. And similarly, for mistakes with vocabulary, it might be a good idea to, if you've got written work that a teacher has marked in the past, to go through it and perhaps write a list of the words that you keep misspelling and write the correct spelling next to them, so you know which words you need to check when you're writing in the test itself. And that paragraphing is clear. So, for me, the easiest way to make clear paragraphing is just to leave a clear line between each paragraph. So while you're practicing, just get into the habit of doing these things. And then you won't have so much time to do it in the test, but you will have some time. So you could actually quickly check that you've said dollars and not pounds, so quickly check that you've put percentage and not number. That'll take a few seconds. Check for that third person S if you know that that's one of your typical mistakes. Okay, so if you've got that extra minute, do use that to check your work. Okay, so let's just try and summarize what we've covered before we go over to the question and answer box. Okay, so analyze the question. So read the instructions carefully and look inside the diagram like we did this morning. Rephrase the information about the diagram into the first sentence of your introduction. Look at the diagram very, very carefully again to identify the main feature, the trends, the change, and that is going to be the second sentence of your introduction, the all-important overview. Then go back to the diagram and think about the data that needs to be described, what order it should be written in, and then use that information to write your body paragraph. And if there's time, and remember, you don't have to write a conclusion, only if you've got time, write a brief 1 or 2 line conclusion. Okay, so, oh yes, sorry, last one. Check for your typical mistakes, again, if you've got time. Okay, so now what I'd like to do is try and answer some of your questions. So please, from now on, can you write your questions in the question and answer box? So if you've got questions that haven't been answered yet, can you put them into the question and answer box? Inal says we never give opinion of the question. No, you do not give of the diagram. No, in task 1 you don't. That's correct, Inal. So Maripaz says, the introduction should have the overview. It's not separated. Maripaz, I don't think it's absolutely critical that it's not separated, but I would strongly, strongly advise that you do put it in the introduction so it's clear right from the beginning. Are there any words or phrases we should avoid using this type of questions? Melinda, Melinda, I mean, it's an academic report, so obviously you should avoid slang language, you should avoid idioms, you should try and avoid sort of phrasal verbs and things like that. You should try and write formal academic English. So it's not a matter of just words or phrases. It's the whole tone, the whole register of your answer. Denise has asked, do you have to write a heading? No, you don't have to write a heading. Absolutely not. Don't waste time doing that. Think how many paragraphs should be in task 1? Hazel is asking. That's really sorry, but it depends on the diagram. Usually what happens here is you have an introduction with the overview, you have at least one body paragraph. That's usually sufficient. The thing about task 1 is, strictly speaking, you don't have to paragraph if you don't want to, because it's not until a level 8, a band 8, that paragraphing is marked. But it's important that you should do it because you might get an 8, and so do the paragraphing. Does the paragraphing separate the introduction from the body and also from the conclusion? Yes, it does. So a gap between the introduction and the body, and between the body and the conclusion. Shilpa is asking, is there any way to practice the IELTS test? Shilpa, I'll be giving you a list of resources in a minute. So if you could just wait for that. Sorry, the questions are jumping up and down. So Shilpa, yes, we'll give you that information in a minute. Irvin is saying if you cannot reach 150 words is a penalization. You're not penalized in IELTS, Irvin. There's no negative marking. But the problem, if you don't write 150 words, it probably means that you haven't actually covered all aspects of the task. The task is designed so that you can write a good answer, an adequate answer in 150 to 180 words. So I think if you're writing fewer words than that, it probably means you haven't put all of the main points in. You haven't picked out the main features that you had to report. Somebody's asking, I can't catch their names. I've lost them. Oh yes, Chris Bell is asking if task 1 and task 2 worth the same. No, task 1, 20 minutes, whereas task 2 is 40 minutes. And the reason for that is that task 2 has twice as many marks. Okay. Somebody's asking what is the total word limit. There is no limit to how many words you want to write. The problem is you've only got 20 minutes. And if you're trying to write 200, 250 words for task 1, you're probably going to run out of time for task 2. And it also probably means that you're putting in information which is not important. Remember, the instruction says you must select the data. So if you're writing many, many words, it could be that you're actually picking out too much data and you're not picking out the relevant, significant data. No, Diane, you can't use bullet points to organize the body. It's got to be full sentences, no notes, no bullet points. Nadia is asking whether it's necessary to write the actual numbers. Yes, write the actual numbers. It's easier to write a number than write the word of the number because we might introduce a spelling mistake. So yes, write the number. You're being asked to write about numbers. You're asked to write about a bar chart or a pie chart or a line graph. That's numbers. So do use those. Ren is saying we're informed by our IELTS teacher that we've been penalised for errors. No, you do not get penalised in IELTS. You don't have marks taken off mistakes. So I think that bit of information was probably a bit misleading. There is no negative marking in IELTS. Okay. Somebody's asking about using, Rabia, using figurative language. Rabia, you're writing a sort of almost like a scientific academic report. So no, we want to use, solid academic scientific words. We don't want to bring in other sort of figurative language. It's a straightforward report. Okay, let's have a look. So yes, necessary to write from data. Yes, it is. Let me just see. Somebody's writing out how many lines is it for 150 words. Well, I'm sorry, but that's another depend question, because obviously it depends on your handwriting. The best thing I would suggest for that is you go to IELTS.org and you download a sample answer sheet for the writing test. And then when you're practicing at home, write your essay on that actual answer sheet. And then you can have a look at that, then count your words, and then you'll be able to see that you need half a page to write 150 words, or 3/4 of the page. It depends on, your writing. Our numbers, Nipponika, our numbers also count the number of words, should I at 43 or 43? Well, if you look at what you've written, Nipponika, you've written 43, F-O-U-R-T-Y, which is a spelling mistake, and that's exactly why you should write the number if you can. If you write 43 as 43 rather than the word, it avoids spelling mistakes in numbers, because the spelling of numbers in English is really very, very difficult. It's not always logical, let's say. Again, Jai saying how many approximately lines. Please, you're going to have to write the essays and count your own words. Is it advised to leave a single line for the paragraphs? Yes, I think so, Robert. It's much, much clearer. Someone's asking about tenses. The tense will depend on the diagram. So if it's in the past, you'll use the past tense. If it's a diagram that's looking at something that might go on to the future, then you might have to use future forms. Aminul's asking about American and British English. I'm not sure what you mean by mix up exactly, Aminul. Both British and American English are perfectly acceptable. I think the important thing is to try and be consistent. Choose one or the other and stick with that. Someone's asked, is it easier to take a paper test or a computer one? I'm afraid that depends. Again, it's a depend question, Hamza. We will be talking about that more, but it depends on whether you're happier on a computer. The test is exactly the same. Okay, let's have one more question. Somebody's asking, Neha, how many bands for task 1? Is it true that there are 3 bands for task 1 and 6 bands for task 2? No, absolutely not. There's 9 bands for both writing. So from 0 to 9 for task 1 and 0 to 9 for task 2. Exactly the same. Okay. Okay, so are we supposed to use idioms in IELTS writing, for example, in a nutshell, Oksana? Will it influence the score? Well, idioms only if they are correct ones. And the thing is, with academic writing, we don't tend to use idioms so much. Idioms are things that we use more often when we're speaking, so it's fine to use idioms in the speaking test. That'd be absolutely fine, but we tend not to do that in writing, and particularly not in academic writing. So I would leave the idioms out. Is it essential to write a conclusion? No, Subasinger, let me just repeat, it's absolutely not essential. If you've got the time, do it, but don't worry if you haven't. Yes, Nazish, are there more forms of questions other than graphs and charts? Yes, there are. There are the ones we showed at the beginning of the presentation, and we'll be looking at maps and we'll be looking at process diagrams next week on Thursday at the same time. Okay, just one more question and then we'll do that. Okay. Somebody's asking about, is it necessary to take the academic if they're applying for the test? Yes, it is. Usually universities demand that you take the academic version of the test. Okay, so I'm sorry we haven't managed to answer all of your questions. We're just going to finish off now by sharing some of the resources that you can have to use. Okay, so you can go to takeielts.org for lots of support material, so please go there. If you had some questions that we didn't manage to answer this morning, and I'm sorry about that, but just so many people and so many questions, go to our Take IELTS official Facebook page, IELTS Experts, and there you will have IELTS experts to answer your questions. Some of you were asking about whether you should take the computer delivered version of the test. Yes, it will depend on how comfortable you feel on the computer, etc., whether it's available in your country. But if you just want to know more, then go and try the free computer delivered familiarization test at Take IELTS, and that will give you an idea of whether you feel comfortable with that or not. Also, there's a program Road to IELTS, which has practice tests, interactive activities, and tips on question types for all 4 skills. There are sort of 10 hours of that available, and if you're registered for a British Council IELTS test, there's 30 hours of that you can download and work on from home. There's also a completely free online preparation course, Future Learn, which is a British Council course. That's a 3-week course. So again, particularly in these very trying times when we're not sure when things are going to start up again, perhaps in your country or your part of the world, 3 weeks would be an ideal time to hone your skills and really get to grips with IELTS. Also for your phone, Download these IELTS apps. So the IELTS Prep app, lots of free practice tests, grammar tips, exercises, quizzes. It's really useful. It's on your phone. Similarly, for vocabulary, obviously, the IELTS Word Power app and Word Ready. You can have those on your phone. They're completely free. So do go and take advantage of all of these things. There's also, books, there's lots of books out there, and we don't really recommend any particular book by any particular author or anything like that. But we do have the IELTS official practice material, and we have books of top tips, which you can buy online perhaps. And lastly, there is the indicator test. It's been launched, an online test that can be taken from the safety and comfort of your home. It assesses all 4 skills: listening, reading, writing, and speaking, and provides indicative band scores. Your performance will be marked by our qualified IELTS examiners, and you'll receive your scores within 7 days of taking the test. The test is available in limited countries for the moment and for a limited period to support you all during the COVID-19. It must be clear that the IELTS indicator provides an indicative score only, and it is not accepted by all organisations and does not and will not replace the in-person IELTS test. So if you're interested in this, please check with your university or educational provider before you book the test. But for more information, do go to this website. Okay, so I think we've come to the end of our time. Thank you again very much for attending. Good luck, and perhaps I'll see some of you next Thursday for the other one. Best of luck, stay safe, bye-bye.
The recording has stopped.